She was America's queen of comedy, always laughing, always making others laugh. But in 1977, Carol Burnett didn't just perform, she exposed something raw, real, and painfully unforgettable. That night, inside the studio, the laughter stopped. The audience sat frozen. Crew members wiped away silent tears. What unfolded on stage would be hailed as one of the most powerful moments in television history. Critics called it brilliance. Awards followed. But as the lights dimmed and the cameras cut, Carol walked off that set forever changed. What happened in that episode shook her so deeply, she made a vow, she would never watch it. Not once. Not ever. And decades later, she still hasn't. For 47 years, she held on to that promise, never to revisit the moment that stripped away the laughter and left only raw, unfiltered truth. Carol Burnett, America's beloved queen of comedy, who spent decades turning heartache into humor, couldn't bear to watch herself in that one unforgettable scene. There were no jokes. No funny voices. Just brutal, soul-bearing honesty that cut deeper than any performance she had ever given. In those few minutes on stage in 1977, something shattered, not just in the show, but in her. And behind the applause and critical acclaim, behind the awards and praise, was a woman quietly broken by what she had just revealed. Because that scene didn't come from imagination, it came from a place she rarely let anyone see. It came from a childhood soaked in silence and sorrow. Long before the spotlight, long before the fame, there was a little girl in San Antonio, Texas, just 2 years old, sitting by a window, waiting for footsteps that never brought comfort. The footsteps that came belonged to strangers inside her own home. Her parents, both drowning in alcohol, had forgotten what it meant to raise a child. In that house, love was absent, bedtime stories were replaced with bottles, and the only way to survive was to become invisible. Her father, shaking hands and fragile presence, worked off and on at a movie theater, unable to hold on to anything, not jobs, not hope, not even her. Carol Burnett's story didn't begin with comedy. It began in the quiet terror of neglect, in the kind of silence that teaches a child to hide their pain behind a smile. And that is why, after all these years, she still refuses to look back at the moment she let that pain slip through. Because for once, the laughter stopped, and the truth was too real to relive. Carol Burnett's mother drifted through life in a fog of broken promises and bitter disappointments, emotionally vacant even when she was right there in the room. Her presence brought no warmth, no comfort, only the cold shadow of neglect. Both her parents, lost in their addictions, would eventually drink themselves into the grave, leaving behind not just a daughter, but a legacy of abandonment and emotional scars that Carol would carry for decades. And yet, in the middle of that darkness, something extraordinary began to flicker. Because the human spirit, even when crushed, finds strange and beautiful ways to survive. Before most children learn to read, Carol had already discovered her secret weapon, laughter. Making people laugh, even for a fleeting moment, gave her the power to reshape the pain into something she could live with. When her parents finally let go of all pretense of parenting, salvation came from the most unexpected place, her grandmother, Mabel White. With fierce love and no money, Mabel took Carol away from the chaos of Texas and headed for a new beginning in Hollywood. But there was no stardom waiting. No lights, no cameras, no dreams fulfilled. Instead, Carol and her grandmother found themselves crammed into a single dingy room in a rundown boarding house filled with society's forgotten souls, the lonely, the broken, the barely surviving. They lived on just $20 a week. Toilet paper was a luxury they couldn't afford, so they stole it quietly from movie theater bathrooms. Not out of mischief, but out of the sheer desperation to get through one more day. This was the raw, invisible beginning of a girl who would one day become a legend. But something magical happened inside those falling walls. Carol found out about the thing that would make her most talented and most burdensome. The power to find happiness even when things are bad. She made up Karen, her twin sister. In every way, Karen was different from Carol. Beautiful, sure of themselves, and always happy. Carol made Karen seem so real that even the desperate adults around them thought she was real. She would run up the fire escape, change her hair and clothes, and then come back as Karen. Very cute and fun. It wasn't just playtime. This was Carol's first acting masterclass. She learned that people need you to be someone else so they can forget about their own pain for a while. But Carol's favorite way to get away was to go to the movies with her grandma every Saturday for 50 cents. More than 10% of their weekly pay. Carol could forget about the squeaky voices and peeling paint for those precious few hours in the dark. Life sparkled, stars danced, and people kissed on screen. Carol heard something that would change her life forever in one of those dark rooms. The famous "Tarzan" yell by Johnny Weissmuller rang around the room and hit Carol like lightning. She went home and practiced that sound over and over again, getting better at every pitch and beat. She had no idea that she was working on her singing and learning how to control her breath in a way that most singers take years to get good at. It was just a game to her. But later, people would laugh and applaud so hard that they fell down. What started as a child's desperate attempt to copy turned into one of her first comedic tools. She had learned the most important thing in her life by the time she was 7 years old. Laughter protected her from a world that wanted to break her soul. But she didn't know that shield would get too heavy for her to carry one day. Carol as a child had no idea how that scream would be put to the test. As Carol was getting ready to graduate from high school, she had one dream that seemed both impossible and inevitable. Getting news. She felt like she had to finish what her mother couldn't because her mother had always wanted to be a writer. The plan was to get into UCLA, but when it was time to sign up, she was hit with a harsh truth. She lacked the $50 she needed for school. It would have meant the end of the dream for most people. It looked like it was for a while. After that, something strange happened. A stranger, whose name Carol never found out, came forward and gave her the exact amount she needed. Not any strings connected. There was no reason given, she was only given enough money to change her life forever. She was going to study writing at UCLA, but fate had other ideas. One acting class she chose turned her whole world upside down. Something inside her clicked in that classroom. She wasn't shy, poor, or hard to see anymore. She was loud, funny, and fully living. It paid off quickly to take a chance and change majors. At the end of her first year, she was named UCLA's theater program's most bright newcomer. It wasn't just a title. It showed her that she wasn't crazy for going after this impossible dream. But Carol's big break came when she least expected it. As an usherette, she made 65 cents an hour and was at a party in San Diego putting hors d'oeuvres in her purse to give to her grandma when she got home. Then a stranger in a sharp suit walked up to her. He wasn't working in show business. He was from La Jolla and made a lot of money building ships. He made her a deal that seemed too good to be true when she told him her dream of making it big on Broadway in New York. $1,000 for her and her boyfriend, Don Soyan. But there are 3 rules: don't say his name. Get to New York with the money only. And if they did well, they had to help other people do well too. He didn't want praise or credit. He just said that he was repaying the favor that someone had shown him. Carol and Dawn left UCLA with $2,000 in cash. They went east. Carol had never been anywhere else besides Texas. She didn't have any friends in New York, but she didn't mind. She said she wasn't scared because she didn't know enough. The money started to disappear very quickly, which was scary. Carol started to cry while calling her family on a pay call. They begged her to come home. Right before she gave up, she heard something on the radio that would change everything. Carol, the name of the storm, was moving up the coast. What did it mean to her? It gave her the strength to stay and fight for her dreams. Without much time, she was at the Practice Club, an old boarding house for young women who want to make it in the arts. She shared a room with 4 other actors and paid $18 a week for a cot. She thought it was heaven even though there was only 1 bathroom and 1 bedroom. The first big break she got was from something very silly. A love song about the stiff and very serious U.S. Secretary of State John Foster Dulles. It was a joke song that was way too silly and over the top, but Carol sang it so well that it became her signature song. The crowds went crazy. She was asked to be on the Jack Show and then the Ed Sullivan Show. She got on the Sullivan stage, but her knees were shaking. But by the end of her show, everyone was laughing so hard they could not breathe. That mystery loan was paid back in full by Carol and Dawn exactly 5 years after they got it. The millionaire never replied, and he stayed nameless the whole time. But Carol's good luck was just getting started. She was turning pain into performance and weakness into power, and it was this that would soon make her one of the biggest TV stars of all time. She didn't know that this gift would one day make her face a truth that was too painful to bear. In show business, success can happen faster than anyone could have imagined. And for Carol, that speed really picked up when the Carol Burnett show started. That night, history was made on TV. 12 years in a row, 30 million people gathered in front of their TVs every week to watch Carol and her team do magic. It was more than just good reviews. This happened in a cultural way. But this is what really made it groundbreaking. In a field mostly made up of guys, Carol Burnett was the first woman to host her own primetime variety show. She did more than just break the glass ceiling. She broke it totally. The show's popularity wasn't a fluke. Carol had put together a dream team that worked so well together it almost seemed supernatural. Harvey Korman had schooling in theater and had perfect timing. Vicki Lawrence began as a youngster and quickly rose to fame in the comedy world. Then there was Tim Conway. It was managed chaos in a suit for Conway. One of his rules could not be broken. Don't go all out during practice. His best lines were saved for the live shows, which threw everyone off. This meant that every show was brand new and electric. People most often use this example in what is now called the elephant story. A sketch from their regular family show showed Conway going on and on about a circus elephant in a long, silly story. Harvey, Carol, and Vicki all tried very hard to stay in character, but the story kept getting funny and stranger. By the end, even Vicki Lawrence had lost it. She replied with a line that was so out of the blue that it made everyone on set laugh, even Conway. That kind of thing became the heart of the show. Real, raw, and not at all staged. The awards kept coming in. 25 Emmy Awards while it was on the air. Carol won several Golden Globes herself. The show changed everything that came after it, not just made people laugh. Saturday Night Live owes a lot to Carol's show for making sketch comedy possible. But the most memorable regular part of the show was also its most difficult, the family sketches. Carol played the part of Eunice Higgins, a woman whose broken dreams and disappointments made her feel heavy. Most of the time, these sketches were funny and weird at the same time, with just the right amount of edge to keep things interesting. Eunice was angry and upset all the time, and she always felt like life had skipped her by. Even though the person was funny, there was always something sad going on beneath the surface that Carol knew all too well. These sketches were just the right amount of funny and dramatic for years. People laughed, but they also knew that Eunice's problems were based in reality. People could relate to the character because she stood for everyone who had ever felt stuck or wondered if their dreams were just silly thoughts. When the show's 10th year came around, Carol and the writers chose to go even further than they had before. They came up with a sketch that would push the edges of what comedy could be, what TV could handle, and what Carol could handle. They had no idea that what they were about to make would be so terrible and powerful that Carol would remember it all her life. It would only be a few weeks until the show that would make her swear she'd never watch it again. When someone whose whole job is to turn pain into laughter finally faces pain that is too deep to change, what do? Carol Burnett was about to find out in front of everyone. The writers had made a family sketch that was different from anything else they had done. The event was known as the Gong Show, and it would push Eunice Higgins and Carol into areas they had never been before. In the sketch, Eunice joins a low-rent talent show because she's sure that singing on TV will finally get her the fame and attention she's always wanted. The situation could have been funny in a dozen different ways. But the writers chose something that changed everything. Don't make jokes, use a funny accent, or move around too much. Just a desperate and crazy woman who thought that this one moment could finally make her whole life worth living. Finding the good in the bad and turning pain into laughter was what Carol did for a living. There would be no change this time, though. This time, the pain would just be pain. As the cameras were rolling, Carol went on stage as Eunice in that fake talent show. Then something changed. People in the room were hoping to laugh, but what they saw was something completely different. This wasn't funny. This was surgery that wasn't numbed, and millions of people watched it live. Eunice sang with a voice full of desperate hope, putting all of her heart into a show that she was sure would make her life better. Then the judges' answer, which was led by Alan Luton, a real-life game show leader. They didn't just say bad things about her, they ruined her. They made fun of her voice, how she looked, and her dreams. They made fun of her. How everyone had always laughed at Eunice. The camera caught every little move Carol made with her face. Her eyes showed that her hope was dying. Seeing that she had been deceiving herself. The crushing weight of all the disappointments she had experienced in her life finally broke her heart. The lights then went down, which shocked everyone in the room. As Eunice sat alone on stage, the camera slowly moved away. She had tears running down her face. There was no music, no joke, and no one to save the broken woman. There was only the sound of her crying. The people in the room weren't sure what to do. They went to see something funny, but what they saw was more like a documentary than a sketch comedy show. The group was stunned and kept quiet. It was hard for many people not to cry. But Carol was the one who felt it the most. Before she left the stage, she made a promise to herself that she would keep. She has kept that promise for 47 years. That show would never be on her list. Never, ever, ever. After many years, she would say why the pain was so real. She said that Eunice's pain was the same as her own. Because it was in a lot of ways. Carol had been poor as a child and had dreams that didn't seem possible. She had been laughed at and brushed off. She knew what it was like to want something so badly that you would give up everything for a chance. You're not good enough, pretty enough, talented enough, was something she knew how hard it was to hear. That sketch wasn't just about Eunice breaking. It showed all the times Carol had been hurt. All wrapped up in a devastating 7-minute act that would be praised as brilliant TV work. The reviewers all agreed that it was good. Then came the awards. It was called groundbreaking, revolutionary, and it was the right mix of comedy and drama that showed TV could be art. She couldn't see any of that, though. All she could see was her own pain. It was being shown to millions of people in high definition, but they had no idea they were seeing someone's real sadness. That episode has been in a place that Carol doesn't want to go for 47 years. She knows it's there, but she hasn't been able to face it yet. The woman whose whole job was to make people laugh out loud from pain has finally made something too real, too raw, and too true to watch. And that may be the strongest proof of how talented she is. It's not always the case that the best acts are the ones that break us. Anyone who knew Carol's story saw the irony. This woman had been left alone, lived in poverty, and been deeply let down. Who turned every broken heart into a joke and every loss into a chance to win. But she couldn't look at the 7 minutes of film that showed the truth about her. But life kept testing her, even though she tried to avoid that one act. At just 13 years old, her daughter Carrie would start to fight addiction. Carol would watch her infant war with demons eerily much like the ones that destroyed her own mother and father. Carol fought for Carrie with the identical willpower she'd brought to her career. She used her philosophy that every now and then you need to love someone sufficient to let them hate you. Carrie subsequently got clean and she and Carol have become nearer than ever. They worked collectively and delivered a Broadway play based totally on Carol's youth known as Hollywood Arms. But tragedy struck again when Carrie died at just 38 from pneumonia because of lung cancer. Carol became devastated, however she finished the play anyway. She owed it to Carrie, she stated. The sample persisted whilst Carol's youngest daughter, Erin, fell into her very own war with addiction. At 87, Carol stepped up again, taking custody of her grandson, Dylan. The female who had started out lifestyles unwanted had come to be the anchor for 3 generations. At 91 years antique, Carol Burnett keeps to work, to carry out, to make people chuckle. She's appeared in recent years on higher names Saul and Palm Royale, proving that expertise does not lessen with age. But even now with 7 a long time of performance at the back of her, that episode stays untouchable. It sits within the documents like a chunk of her soul she gave away and might by no means quite get again. The episode aired once and changed TV for all time. It proved comedy suggests should take care of dramatic weight, that audiences were hungry for something real. It opened doorways for shows that might blend humor and heartbreak in methods that appeared not possible before Carol showed it can be done. But the private fee changed into big. In interviews through the years, Carol has described the cartoon as important but devastating. She's satisfied they did it, she says, because it changed into honest and critical. But truth, she learned, occasionally comes with a charge too excessive to pay twice. Via it all, that overall performance remains the only reality Carol cannot face. She's conquered stages round the arena. Won every award there is to win and touched thousands and thousands of lives along with her gift. But that 7-minute sketch exists in an area she genuinely can't move. Perhaps it really is K. Maybe some art is supposed to be too effective for its author to undergo. Perhaps the truth that Carol cannot watch its miles evidence of the way actual it turned into. The episode that aired once 47 years in the past maintains to persuade comedy and drama nowadays. But for Carol Burnett, it remains a door she closed and locked. A room in her reminiscence that she's never quite ready to enter. Perhaps it's the final lesson in Carol's first-rate story. Every now and then the finest art comes from freely giving pieces of yourself that you can by no means quite get back. Every so often making others giggle method confronting truths which are too heavy to carry 2 times. And occasionally the most powerful performance is the one you may in no way bear to look at again.